Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for Sunday School at To God Be the Glory Ministry, where we are located at 1313 Caps Hill Mine Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. Feel free to support us through PayPal as well as through Giveify by also searching for To God Be the Glory Ministry at 1313 Caps Hill Mine Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. Please visit us on our website at www.tgbtgm.org. We are continuing with Casket Empty, which is a series started by professors of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, with Dr. Carol Kaminsky writing Casket Guideline and Dr. David Palmer writing the Empty Guidelines. But remember, it stands for Creation, Abraham, Sinai, Kingdom, Exile, Temple, Expectation, Messiah, Pentecost, Teaching, and Yet to Come. And congratulations, we made it through Casket. We're starting with Empty. So, the E in Empty stands for expectation. And it is the intertestamental period of roughly about 400 years between Matthew and Malachi. Last week, we ended with the building and the construction of the temple. We still have various Jewish groups in what is known as diaspora, the dispersion. Some are in Egypt, some are in Babylon, some are in Persia, and then the others came back into Israel, into the homeland. And we're going to talk about some key historical events that have happened. We are not going to cover any books in the Bible that we had, but there are some things that are written during that time that we can see. So we're going to first go back to the vision that Daniel had about that statue, the one of gold, of silver, of bronze, and then of iron. And those represent 4 separate kingdoms that are going to come up afterward. And then he also had a dream about these various 4 beasts that are coming out of the sea. That of a lion, that of a bear, that of a ram, and then of a goat. And then one that is kind of a humanoid. So that is what we're going to go over today. We first look at what we'll call the decline of the Persian Empire. And remember, Darius sends everybody back into Egypt. He eventually tries to conquer Greece, but of no avail. He then has a son who we see called Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus, and he tries to conquer Greece, but he also fails. He comes back out of anger, gets rid of his wife, and that is the Persian king that we see get married to Esther. Now, he has some other sons who tries to conquer Greece, and they also fail. Then there is a known king by the name of Alexander. Alexander the Great is a very prominent general. He conquers Persia and a good majority of from Egypt all the way up into India in about 22,000 square miles, a very big empire. And a key component happens when he is taking over the land and he's coming into Israel. He is met by a high priest named Jaddua, dressed in the priestly robe, and he greets Alexander the Great with no fight. Alexander the Great is just so amazed at this priest and even has a vision about him some years before. He sacrifices to God, and this starts a good history between the Greeks and Israel. Now, Alexander the Great eventually passes away, and he has various generals who he leaves up his land. The first general that covers Israel is the dynasty known as Ptolemy. Ptolemy eventually is building his great city in Alexandria, named after Alexander the Great, in Egypt, very prominent city, which goes on to rival just Rome in the Roman Empire of just how magnificent this city is. Within this library that he is putting together, he gets a copy of the Jewish scriptures translated into Greek. Eventually, this becomes known as the Septuagint, which is later the Greek Hebrew Old Testament that a lot of Jesus and a lot of the other disciples are reading at that time. Well, the good times don't last. Ptolemy gets taken over by another general named Seleucid, And Seleucid has a pretty good reign with the Hebrews, and he pretty much lets them do whatever it is that they want. But eventually, Seleucid has a son named Antiochus, keeps it up the same, and Antiochus eventually has a lot of other cities named after him, such as Antioch. We're going to come back to Antioch later on within the New Testament. Antioch has a son called Antiochus IV of Epiphanes, and he eventually goes on and he conquers the Ptolemy Empire over in Egypt. But then Rome comes down and pretty much pushes him out of there. And he is so angry at this defeat that he eventually goes into Israel and just obliterates them. He oppresses them. He makes horrible sacrifices of pigs on the altar in the temple. And this leads into the Maccabean revolt between 167 and 164 BC. They eventually pushed him out, and this sets up what is known as the Hasmonean Dynasty. The Hasmonean Dynasty, they're influenced by Greek culture, and there's a lot of tension between the high priest and a lot of the priestly class. Eventually, because of the infighting in between the different rulers and kings of the Hasmonean Empire, they appealed to the Roman Empire to come in and settle their disputes. In 63 BC, Pompey, one of the great Roman generals, comes in and he kind of takes over the region. And this period that the Hebrews had of not having to answer to anyone is ended, and they are now under Roman Empire. There are a few different years that I want to give to you. 430 BC is the year that the Persians end up leaving or granting the Hebrews to go back. Then in 430 BC, I'm sorry, that is the year right around the time that Malachi is written. So between 430 BC up until Matthew, there are no books of the Bible that are written. Another year to keep in mind is 330 BC, which is the year that Alexander the Great pretty much takes over the Persian Empire. Then there is 63 BC, which is the year that Pompey takes over Israel. The next and final year that I want you to keep in mind is 6 BC, which is the year that the Messiah is born. During this period of the 400 years, there begins to be this new genre of literature written known as Apocalyptic Literature. This involves a lot of visions and a lot of dreams, speaking through signs and symbols, and it talks about the reigning of God's kingdom over the earth. A key figure in here becomes known as the Messiah that would institute God's rule back into Israel and throughout the world. Now the question is, who is this Messiah? That takes us to next week where we will talk about Messiah.